Hockey Inside Out, presented to you by the Montreal Gazette.
Welcome to the Hockey Inside Out Show. I'm Montreal Gazette sports editor Stu Cowan, joined by regulars Chris Nyland and Jack Todd, along with Michael Farber from TSN and Sports Illustrated. Chris, GM Marc Bergevin, trade deadline, did he do enough for this team?
Listen, he did what he could, I think, to make this team better depth-wise for the playoffs. Everybody seemed to think they needed a scorer. I believe that if you to go out and get a scorer, you'd have to mess with the core of this team. They were 2 points out of first place in the NHL, not in the East, in the NHL. Yeah. And you're going to go disrupt the core of this team? I thought that would have been a bad move. I think he added depth and a couple guys who can check, kill penalties, do the things that Michel Therrien likes. So we talk about the scoring thing. I think that's going to have to come from, it's going to have to come from within now. But listen, he's sticking to his plan, and I like that. You agree?
Yeah, same here. At least he didn't do what Glenn Sather did. He didn't. He still has first-round draft picks. He still has the key people here and the people they think a lot of looking toward the future. Yeah, I would love to have Evgeny Malkin, for instance, but it's not going to happen. So
it's been suggested that if Montreal doesn't win a cup, it'll be because of lack of scoring. Last year, maybe Montreal didn't win a cup because Chris Kreider ran over Carey Price. The point is, we don't know, and this team is constituted. Reminds me a little bit of '93. Comfortable playing close games, terrific goaltending. We'll see. The problem that I have is the players they added are the teams that these players came from. Jeff Petrie came from Edmonton, beaten up. Maybe he can rise above that. Maybe he brings some of that. Torrey Mitchell, a long time with San Jose, a good organization, but Mitchell and Flynn both come from Buffalo, where they've been beaten down. Does any of that seep into this organization?
Oh, Mike, they cannot be that traumatized that they can't come here and soak up
Toronto, at least.
Great hockey city and hockey team.
So there's no ex-Cub factor here?
No, there's no trauma here. PTSD, they don't have.
Mike, to you, what was the biggest story of the trade deadline day?
Tanking. And we go back to Chris's favorite franchise, the Buffalo Sabres. Yeah, I thought what we saw, especially trading Neuwirth at the end. Now, yes, he was a UFA, and I suppose you had to get rid of him. But it reminded me in 1984 when Roberto Romano, a good Montreal guy, made the mistake of winning a couple of games for Pittsburgh when they were in the turtle race with the Devils to get Mario Lemieux. So they sent him to the minors. Well, we can't have that. You can't win games here. So they sent him to Baltimore and brought up a guy named Vincent Tremblay, who Vinny Tremblay played 4 games, gave up 24 goals, and got the Penguins right back on track to get Mario Lemieux. And so the deal, with no disrespect meant for Chad Johnson going the other way, reminded me of Neuwirth, who had won a couple games and played really well in a loss against Florida. No, we can't have that now. Your eyes on the prize, Connor McDavid.
Now, you mentioned the Rangers earlier. Glenn Sather did the opposite of Marc Bergevin. They have no first-round draft pick 2013, 14, 15, 16. Going for it all. Is this the right move?
Well, Glenn's getting up there in age, right? He wants to win before the gig's up, and
So it's his age, not the age of the players.
Yeah. So, did they do enough? Again, it remains to be seen. We'll see when the playoffs come. I think that team beat the Montreal Canadiens last year. Systematically, they beat them. The Canadiens could not solve the riddle of trying to get through the neutral zone. Regardless of Carey Price being there or not, I truly believe that team could not score enough goals last year because the system that Alain Vigneault stuck in the face of Michel Therrien. I don't think he did enough to adjust during the series.
Michael, is it a case the Rangers better win this year?
Well, Yandel's a bit of a gamble, but remember, this starts with Boyle not getting the job done. So you need that other kind of defenseman. Yandel gives the puck away a lot, but he's very dynamic offensively. And it's a high-risk, potentially high-reward move because I don't know how you feel, Jack, but I look at the East and say, no matter what happens in the first round, I won't be shocked. I mean, any one of those 8 teams is capable of winning at least a first-round series.
Including Boston, which scares the hell out of me. Pissed off from last year coming into a series, after a bad season, well, for them. They're going to be nasty. I heard Jacques Demers the other night pick Washington from the East, but they're all in there.
What were your first impressions of Jeff Petrie on the blue line?
You know, he moved the puck all right. Again, one game, it's hard to say, but, I think he comes as advertised, right? He's a puck-moving defenseman, not overly physical, throw the hit here and there. I think they have again, it's nice to think, we'll get the puck out of the zone, we're gone. But then you got to keep it in the other end for a while. And when it comes back at you, they tend to have too many defensemen that cannot clear around the net. And that worries me. I was thinking about a Roman Polak, guys like that. Somebody tough. I like a tough guy with a puck-moving guy. They have so many puck-moving guys. You saw the 4 goals the other night against San Jose.
That's why I liked Patterson when he was here. Patterson can move people. He's a little bit of a hybrid. I thought he played really, really well. Better than Tenorti.
Petrie played well against Montreal here when Edmonton. I thought he played a real good game. All I know about him is right-handed shot, not a bad thing. But what happens when you play him with Gonchar and take Beaulieu away from Gonchar? Now, yeah, you got your right-left instead of having 2 lefts on your second pair, but you wonder about the trickle-down effect, and that's every deadline day. What are the new guys coming into the mix? And I'll take your, guys not being traumatized, but how do they affect the team? What is the effect on the other players? I mean, last year, St. Louis goes out and gets Ryan Miller. They're not in the goalie market, they're in a Miller market. Wins the first 2 games against Chicago, loses the next 4. How did that work for you? Last year, LA, well, we need scoring. Gaborik. They're almost out in the first round, and we would be saying, oh, this was a terrible deadline move. So the point is, we don't know. The only thing I do know is that somebody in July 1st will be paying Jeff Petrie way too much money.
We'll take a quick break, and we'll be back and talk a little bit about the mess in Toronto. Welcome back. The Toronto Maple Leafs saga continues, Jack. Phil Kessel ripping the Toronto media. Is there a difference between the Toronto media and the Montreal media?
Honestly, I think all in all, the Toronto media is more forgiving. I think here they hold you to a higher standard in Montreal. That you're just expected to win, period. And that's the fan base, the media, everyone. I think in Toronto, I think what's happened a little bit because the national media are all based there, especially the national television media. There's just so much attention to the Leafs, not necessarily good attention, bad attention, just a lot of national attention that's sort of inflated the team beyond anything the team has been since 1967. And it's turned now into a really nasty situation. It's almost like that team is at war with the city in which it plays, with the fan base, certainly with the media, the players themselves. This is a bad situation, and it might take a while to heal.
Is it fixable, Michael?
I'm not sure it's fixable, but there certainly is a difference between Toronto and Montreal media. I mean, here the media is bilingual.
What were your thoughts of Phil Kessel's comments?
I think they all need to go to therapy. You know what? Sticking up for his teammate. Phil Kessel says he's not a team guy, this and that. I think he's speaking up for his teammate and himself, to be honest with you. But, and again, you have fair game for what you do on the ice. I think the comments that were made that slipped through on the air there were, it's terrible that stuff is written and people say that about someone, especially when it's not true.
Now the Leafs can start officially tanking. We talked about tanking earlier. Ron Wilson mentioned something about tanking.
Surprised, but I guess in a sense, but he was trying to not name the team or the GM, but he said, we went to the finals last year. But I think it was a rat move by bringing George McPhee, exposing George McPhee, basically, for what he asked him to do. And if Wilson had any balls, he would have told him no from the get-go. I'm not going to tank. I'm a coach. I'm not tanking.
This isn't something new in the NHL, though, Michael.
Well, you go back to Mario Lemieux and the Devils and the Penguins in the race to the bottom in 1984, and Eddie Johnston, although he will not admit this to this day, essentially told Luangotti, we have to lose. Can't get off this track. to get Mario. So I asked Lou Angotti, what did you do? He said, well, you send the wrong penalty killers out, you mess up your power play, your matchups. It's not that hard. And Angotti told me that some of the players would kind of look at him in a weird way, but they never said anything to him like, what are you trying to do here? Because I think it was pretty obvious for everybody. Unfortunately, Lou Angotti never coached again in the National Hockey League. He was never a head coach again. And Eddie Johnston went on to have a pretty good career as a GM in other places, including Hartford, and is now an advisor to Mario Lemieux in Pittsburgh.
Do you think that if San Jose was in a position now, just say they were down the bottom of the league, that people would realize they were doing something like that if John Scott was like putting the net or something?
The tanking is obviously for the first overall pick, Connor McDavid, this year. Jack, you threw out an interesting question on Twitter this week. If the 2005 draft was held today, who would you take number one? Sidney Crosby, Carey Price?
I should emphasize here that you're drafting them on the basis of what they do for your team now, not on the career. On the basis of the career, it's Crosby, obviously. But if you're taking the guy today to play in the National Hockey League today, I think that draft goes Carey Price first, Sidney Crosby second, Andrei Kopitar third. It's a huge move, but that's how far Crosby's stock has fallen a bit, but how far up Price's stock is.
Yeah, to me, Price is the front runner for the Hart Trophy. Part of that is how many forwards are having fabulous years, and forwards invariably win this. Pronger was the last defenseman to win it. The only forward I can make a case for right now is John Tavares, who has 30 goals as we speak and has played with a bunch of line mates, and the Islanders have done very well. And you look at what he did once upon a time for Parenteau. Patrick Waugh was right. I mean, Parenteau even is not a top six guy on a really good team, and he struggled here doing that. Well, Tavares made him into a really good player. John Tavares would be the guy if you want to look beyond Carey Price.
Is Parenteau one of the guys who sits now with the two new forwards coming in?
They're going to look at it and say, well, he's just coming back from a concussion. We got to give him a chance. But you know what? I'm looking at what he did before the concussion, and I don't think it's enough. If you're going to sit, if you're trying to put two guys in tonight, I sit Parenteau and I sit Malhotra. Now, you can also throw in Devonte Smith-Pelly, whatever, because he's out of shape. But he's going back to Anaheim. They said he's out of shape. He's fat and out of shape.
How did you feel about that, a coach calling out a player's conditioning?
I didn't like it. I think if you have an issue with a player, you should take it up with him. And then you take it up with him first. But to call him out like that, and hey, you got to get in shape. Just say he needs to be in better shape, and instead of he's fat. Yeah, I think being in Anaheim too, he's in and out of the lineup a little, wasn't playing as much, and he has that build where it's easy to put on, short and stocky.
How do Brian Flynn and Torrey Mitchell make the Canadiens better?
Where I think they might really help is on the penalty kill. They've been killing penalties. Torrey certainly has the speed. Give Plekanec and Pacioretty, who's doing a lot of PK time now, a little bit of a break. That's where I see them being the most useful. I think they'll play, and I don't think there's going to be a Buffalo factor. Mitchell played in San Jose for a while.
These guys, too, they can both play center, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times you don't have to put Plekanec out with Malhotra, or you have a guy who maybe can win a draw already out there. It's like having two centermen sometimes.
And isn't it great having a guy from Greenfield Park, Torrey Mitchell? We got a Quebecer on the team now. Everyone's happy. Well, maybe he's the wrong kind of Quebecer, but there's another Quebecer on the team, and I'm sure we're all delighted by that.
As a native of Greenfield Park, I'd like to welcome him back to the metropolis.
I want to welcome the two American boys.
With that, we'll call it a wrap for this week. We'll see you again next week on Hockey Inside Out.